In the US, we love to talk about how great our Constitution is, and that is how our history is taught, or at least it was when I was growing up. And conservatives love to recite it. They carry copies of it in their back pockets as if it were the Bible. We love our Constitution. For me personally, I feel like it's a bit overrated. I think it was pretty good for 1780, but no one who looks anything like me was in any way represented in that document, except in the part where they talk about 3/5 of a person. So I'm more of a fan of the sequels, 14th Amendment, the 19th Amendment's pretty good. But there is a constitution in North America that I am excited about, and I want to tell you about it. That is Mexico's constitution, La Constitución de 1917. Let's get into it. In 1917, when this constitution was written, and it is in fact called the Constitution of 1917, Mexico had been in the midst of a civil war for the better part of 7 years. This is what is referred to now as the Mexican Revolution. A coalition of farm laborers who wanted land reform and union organizers who wanted labor protections in the industrial cities, and middle-class Mexicans who wanted more of a say in their national government, formed a coalition to violently overthrow the dictator Porfirio Diaz, who had been the dictator of Mexico for 35 years. What followed was a period of instability, but by 1917, a conservative coup had been overthrown by that same coalition of farm laborers who wanted land reform in the South, and industrial workers and farm laborers in the North, and the middle class of Mexico. By the end of the Mexican Revolution, 200,000 combatants would have died, and another 2 million civilians will have perished of famine and disease that were tied to the conflict. However, out of that conflict came a document that was the most progressive constitution of its time and served as a model for constitutions throughout Central and South America, and was a model of revolutionary movements around the world, including the Russian Revolution. The man who became president of Mexico after the defeat of the conservative coup was a man by the name of Venustiano Carranza, who has my favorite historical name that I've ever heard. Carranza was a moderate, but he knew that the coalition that had brought him to power included a lot of people who were not moderate. They were liberal or radical. The coalition that had helped bring him to power included the army of Emiliano Zapata in the south of Mexico and the army of Pancho Villa in the north of Mexico. These men were not moderate men. They were radical, and they differed a little bit in their vision of what Mexico should look like, but they wanted to see radical reforms to the status quo in Mexico. So Carranza knew that he needed to include a good amount of reform in this document if he was going to have the support of the coalition that had brought him to power, if he had any hope of turning this revolutionary movement into a workable government. So he included in this liberal constitution land reform. All of the land in Mexico would officially belong to the state, so that the state could redistribute it legally as it saw fit. It prohibited foreign interests from owning land on any of the borders of Mexico, northern border, southern border, or any of the coastlines, to keep national sovereignty within Mexico, because foreign investment during the Porfiriato, during the dictatorship, was a real problem. It legalized the separation between church and state. So it removed the church as the Catholic Church as the official religion of Mexico. It mandated secular education for everyone in Mexico. And it also, because all of the land in Mexico now belonged to the state, that included land that was owned by the church. So this constitution did a lot to remove the power that the church had in Mexico. One of the things that impresses me most about the Constitution of 1917 is that it mandated labor protections. It mandated an 8-hour work day and a 6-day work week. It mandated workers' safety protections. It mandated disability pay. It had protections for pregnant women who were laboring so that they were restricted from doing work that was too strenuous. It had protections against child labor. It protected the right of citizens of Mexico to unionize. And all of those reforms were things that the United States did not see legalized at the national level until the New Deal. So Mexico beat us to those labor protections by more than a decade. Now, obviously, as we very well know in the United States, the devil is in the implementation, right? So you can have a law all day long on the books, and if it's not implemented, then it doesn't work for you. It doesn't help the citizens of the country. And implementation of this Constitution, as liberal as it was and as reform-minded as it was very difficult. There was a lot of resistance, and there was also a lot of people on the more radical side of things who felt that these reforms could not come fast enough. And the time when the Constitution was put into place was a very volatile time. In the years after the Constitution was put in place, Zapata was assassinated by the Carranza government. Pancho Villa was assassinated by the Carranza government. Carranza was assassinated. And very shortly after this constitution was put into place, the PRI began their one-party rule of Mexico, which would last until the year 2000. However, the Constitution of 1917 is still the law of the land in Mexico, and since it was put into place, in the 100 years since it was put into place, Mexico has made enormous strides towards making the provisions in that Constitution the de facto law in Mexico. So if you are, like me, going to be spending the rest of the Trump presidential years, however many those might be, deconstructing the idea of American exceptionalism and looking to other countries to understand their history, to learn from their examples, and to appreciate their good ideas, I highly recommend looking into the Constitution of 1917. I only grazed the surface of what's in there. It's a remarkable document, very inspiring. And if you like this content, if you like my historical content, please do subscribe to my channel on the YT app. The handle is the same as my TikTok handle. Please follow me on TikTok as well, because who knows, maybe this app will make it past the next couple weeks. But please like and subscribe, and let me know your questions in the comments.